what is going on, friends and loyal listeners of the program? It's Casey from Virginia Gameday, August 10th. Happy to be checking in with an exciting episode. College football's right around the corner. So we got Daily Progress, UVA beat reporter Greg Madia on the pod today to kind of, he's seeing these guys every day. So he's going to give us the rub. We had a great conversation, so we'll get to that. I gonna have a ACC preview coming up within the next week or so. So that'll be the next pod. But first, we're gonna talk to Greg and get basically the UVA preview. So I hope everyone enjoys the episode, and I hope everyone continues supporting because y'all are so great, and it's the best fan base in the world, and I appreciate you guys. Enjoy the conversation. All right, so we've got Greg Madia here from UVA reporter from Daily Progress. Greg, thanks for jumping on with us. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, happy to do it, Casey. Glad to be with you.
So we're in the throes of fall practice now. We're less than a month away from the who's opening game against Richmond. How are the boys looking at on a daily basis with your own eyes?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think some of the big questions coming out of the spring were, does the offensive line shape up to be okay by the time the season starts? And does the defensive line have enough depth? I think you had a lot of questions in the trenches on both sides coming out of the spring. And I think first and foremost, to me, through this first week of training camp, what's been most encouraging is the depth of the defensive line. I think that group is going to actually be maybe the strength of the defense. I mean, I look at what they've done through the transfer portal, adding Cam Butler from Miami of Ohio.
I've heard great things about him.
Yeah, he's already with the first group and likely going to be a starter, is a proven player, all conference player in the MAC. And I think he's going to continue to progress in Charlottesville with UVA. And Devontae Davis from South Carolina, a big body on the interior of the defensive line. And then you talk about Jack Camper from Michigan State. He was with the team in the spring, but didn't practice a whole bunch because he was kind of fighting through some injuries. But he's been out there. And then you talk about Paul Carey from Columbia. And I think, to me, that's a really good four they've added to a defensive line that started to show some promise in the spring, even though maybe the depth wasn't there yet. Like Chico Bennett had a good spring, I thought. Ben Smiley had a good offseason as a whole, like starting in January when Tony Elliott and his staff arrived and has carried that through. So to me, all of a sudden, that defensive line, I haven't even mentioned Aaron Famui.
Yeah.
Elliott has said has done a nice job. So to me, I think you're looking at a pretty good group of defensive linemen. They might be able to roll bodies in and out, which that's a huge thing as you get ready for a season and when you didn't know you might have that coming out of the spring. So they've done a good job addressing those questions. Then on the offensive line, they're still figuring some things out, it looks like, and they're still trying to figure out what that starting five is going to look like. So to me, I think that's still a work in progress. They're still trying to figure it out. But to me, the defensive line has answered some big questions on that side of the ball.
So you think I guess having healthy bodies is good to just keep, the pressure on. But do you think like a defensive front that's going to be able to get pressure, a defensive front that's going to be able to stop the run, or a mix of the both?
Yeah, I think it'll mix a little bit of both, right? And Radzinski's defense, a new defensive coordinator coming from Air Force, he wants to be multiple. Of course, there'll be kind of a base. I guess you can call it probably more of a 4-2-5 than anything else because they'll play with 5 defensive backs and 2 linebackers. But the way those defensive linemen are set up with the players on the edge in that kind of hybrid type role, like Chico Bennett, like Cam Butler, Jack Camper's doing a little bit of end and a little bit of that edge position. I think they're going to be attacking and they want to get pressure on the quarterback. And in the ACC, with all the good quarterbacks throughout the league, you kind of have to. So I think they're going to be an attacking defense up front. And I'm sure he'd love to get home with 4. I don't know how much blitzing yet. You're not sure exactly what type of play caller he is at this point. You got to see him in action first. To see what they want to do. But I think they are starting to believe they can get to the quarterback with 4 guys up front, especially since, some of them have experience. Like Cam Butler was telling me earlier this week that, even at Miami of Ohio, they moved him inside occasionally in pass rushing situations to get more of a tweener on the field there at the edge spot. So if you have some guys that maybe can move inside in certain pass rushing situations, I think that gives
Matched up
UVA.
against a guard.
Right, exactly. I think that gives UVA a unique look. So to me, I think that defensive line, I think, is going to be okay. And Chico Bennett, I think, is a player to watch. He may not be a starter, but he's certainly someone that has some explosiveness. You look at him off the edge and you think, wow, if he can stay healthy, and that's been the one thing since
That
he
was
got
the big question.
yeah, that's been the one question since he's gotten to UVA. Looks like he's healthy now. I think he's going to be somebody who can get after the quarterback a little bit.
Listening to Ball Hawk, he mentioned Chico Bennett as a guy who he thinks could have a breakout year. And then also listening to the Caps Corner podcast, they said that the defensive front, just from an eye test, they look bigger than previous years.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, Ben Smiley to me is one of the players. I think he's listed on the roster. I don't know if it's changed since I looked last week after talking to him. He's listed on the roster at like 260 something, and then he told me he's up to 281. So I mean that's
And
like
that work.
it's like a 15-20 pound difference depending on exactly what that weight was before. But he said he feels like it was a really good productive summer. And you've heard a lot of players talk about the encouraging offseason they had in the weight room with the new strength coach, Adam Smotherman, who followed Tony Elliott from Clemson to UVA. So to me, I think it's been an offseason of adjustment, right? But maybe some adjustment for the better.
That's good. Speaking of, you mentioned ACC quarterbacks. Did you see the Sam Hartman news?
Yeah, I did. And that's tough, right? That Wake team coming off last year's divisional championship and then playing in the ACC title game. That's a tough situation. I guess first and foremost, you just hope he's okay.
Hope he's okay.
Right. I mean, more than anything else, before you get into the football aspect of it, you just got to hope he's okay.
So we talked about, the offensive line. That's always been the biggest question among Wahoo fans. And one of the strengths is the receiving core. But is it too much of a strength? Are there too many mouths to feed? Is that going to be an issue, do you think?
It's an interesting question, right? Especially as UVA goes to a little bit more balanced of an offense overall. Some of the running backs you're going to see maybe featured a little bit more. There's a position battle there. But UVA is going to show a commitment to run the ball and wants to be balanced, wants to be able to run it when they need to run it. So I think, the production, and I think the receivers understand this, is that they're not going to get as many balls thrown their way as they did the last couple of seasons in Robert and I's air raid offense. I think, you look at Billy Kemp, he's adjusting to a little bit more of a role in the slot. He said in the last couple of years he's been more out wide. He's going
to fit the slot just from
Yeah, I think he feels that way too. From what he was saying, he grew up watching guys like Tavon Austin and Wes Welker. He said that's who he kind of models his game after. And, now he's in that spot where he can really emulate those guys. So I think that's kind of a natural move. And then you have Wicks and Thompson, who are just tremendous football players, great receivers. And they're going to catch their fair share of passes, of course, with the talent level that they have. Lavelle Davis is back after his injury, and with his size, you're going to find times where you're going to throw the ball up to him, maybe in a red zone, of course, especially when he can outleap people. I mean, that would make sense to me. So I do think that is a fair question, right? Is there enough passes to go around? I think as long as they understand it's not going to be probably as many as the past couple of seasons, but the offense might still have success and might have more success, then, it's going to be okay as long as it helps the team win games. But it's a fair question, especially with many of those guys and their NFL aspirations on the mind, right?
Yeah. Is Malachi Fields still in the mix?
He's hurt right now. So he's been out since the start of training camp. Tony Elliott had said that he would miss training camp. I think a summer workout injury. So they'll be without him. I think maybe when you look kind of behind the scenes down the list, it's just tough for anybody to crack those those top four. I mean, honestly, I don't see Wicks coming off the field very often. I don't see Thompson coming off the field very often. and with the veteran nature of Kemp and how he knows how to catch passes at this level. I don't see him coming off the field very often. Maybe Davis occasionally, since he's coming off injury, maybe every now and then you want to get him a break or a breather. But to me, with what you have, I don't know how you can pull those four off the field.
Right. Totally. What about the tight end position? That's been a strength of UVA the last couple of years. I know they have some young guys. Grant.
Yeah, Grant Mish. He's there, and I think he'll be your number one tight end this season. And I think they'll use the tight end. Not as much as Jelani Woods was used last year, but I think Mish will be used blocking. And with the way the offensive line is, I wouldn't be surprised if most of the responsibility for the tight end, Sackett Woods in the mix there too.
Yeah,
most responsibility for the tight end, it probably is going to be to help the offensive line out, right? Give the offensive line another extra body to help out with as they retool a little bit. So with the receivers you have, I don't know if you need to use the tight end as much as you did last year. Jelani Woods is a special player with his size, catchability, and then speed that you'd be foolish not to give him the ball. But with this group, I think maybe because of the state of the offensive line, that group is used more to help out the
help with the run.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the O-line will be okay. It's interesting. John Paul Flores, the kid from Dartmouth, who transferred in, I think he's going to be a big help for them. It sounds like they're figuring out exactly where to put him, whether he's played 4 positions already in training camp, he said. So you could see him at center. You could see him at either of the guard spots, maybe at right tackle. He played left tackle at Dartmouth, but because of the level and competition is changing, he feels like his size is probably better suited for a different spot. I think they're trying to figure out whether he'll be in that starting 5 or if he's going to be the guy that they plug in anywhere at any time on the O-line. So I think he's really been a much needed addition for that group.
Is there a battle heating up for the kicker spot, or is that set already?
I think there are competitions going on at all the special team spots. The 2 newcomers have performed well to this point. Tony Elliott said this past Monday, he said both the transfer punter from Minnesota, Daniel Sparks, as well as the freshman kicker, Will Betteridge. I guess he's got the nickname Walk-Off Will. So he's a very confident first-year kicker. To me, it's interesting. That's an interesting spot. And then, of course, you look at the responsibilities, and Elliott said he'd like to be able to divvy up the specialist responsibilities so that nobody's taking on
kickoffs
too much of a workload. Exactly. A Brennan Farrell there as well.
Yeah.
So if you have 3 guys, as long as each of them can take on a role, I think that's a good place to be in special teams wise.
So when you look from the previous regime to now, excluding Tony Elliott, what's the biggest addition, most impactful addition over last year?
That's a good question. I think you got to look defense, right? Rudzinski coming in from Air Force, his knowledge of defenses, proven success at Air Force. I talked to a player at Louisville, an offensive lineman, Caleb Chandler. They played against Air Force in a bowl game this past December, and he was telling me, kind of the one thing that stuck out about playing against Air Force's defense was just how they were always in the right spots. He goes, that was a very disciplined defense, understood their roles. He goes, so you as an offensive lineman, had to make sure your blocking assignments were correct, or you're going to get beat and get the quarterback sacked or get the running back tackled for a loss. So I think some of those principles are being instilled. And I think there's a little bit of renewed confidence with the defense after last year. Those guys got beat up week after week. Yeah. And when it's not going well, that's not a good feeling. So I think this group is kind of refound their confidence a little bit. Nick Jackson in the middle of everything, of course, the linebacker, ACC's leader in tackles last year. The secondary, I think, will be improved. Rudzinski and Karom Cox. Karom Cox was at Air Force too. He's the defensive passing game coordinator and fellow secondary coach with Rudzinski. They share the responsibilities coaching the secondary, and I think that's helped some players too back there. From what it seems, you don't know exactly how it'll go until the bullets start flying and there's an opposing offense on the other side of the field. But I do think Rudzinski's impact, the stress on fundamentals, the stress on, being in the right place at the right time and the right assignments has helped that unit to this point.
So we're less than about 3 weeks out from opening week. Are you excited for your first UVA football season covering the team?
Yeah, I'm excited. So I caught the back end of last year in 3 losses, Notre Dame, Pitt, and then Virginia Tech. But I'm excited to see what happens this season. That Richmond team, from being on the James Madison beat previously, I have familiarity with them, the Spiders, and what they got going on. They've changed offenses. Brought in Billy Kosh, who was the former offensive coordinator at VMI. So they're going to run an air raid system that they're hoping kind of reignite some things on offense for them. They've got some big time transfers in too. A kid by the name of Jacob Harris at receiver, who's an All-American at VMI. Really, really tall, talented player. Could play at a lot of different schools and probably at the FBS level if he wanted to. But he's an outstanding player. And that game will be interesting because it'll be the first look at UVA against an opponent, in this regime, this Tony Elliott era. So yeah, looking forward to it, excited for it, and should be an interesting season.
Yeah, that the second week they're going to Illinois. Some people are kind of penciling that in as a win already, but going on the road in the Big Ten, they brought in a new quarterback from Syracuse who was highly touted coming out of high school. That could be a tough game.
Yeah, Chase Brown, their running back, he ran for 1,000 yards last year. It's kind of looking like a Brett Bielema team, right? What you'd expect. Has an 1,000-yard rusher back. He's getting better on defense. What'd they give up? They gave up 40-something at UVA last year. And after that game, they didn't give up more than 33 in a game. So it shows you, that defense improved as that season went on, and I think they're carrying some of that into this season. So to me, I think that'll be a good measuring stick to see where UVA is at against a team with an identity that's downhill, tough defense, right? Everything you'd expect in a Brett Bielema coach team.
All right. So last question before I let you go. From a journalist perspective, what's your game day look like? Typical game day look like for you?
Typical game day. I try to get to the stadium 2 hours or so before kickoff, look at warm-ups, see what's going on, prep exactly what I'm doing for that day, based on what's going on the field, stories I've got planned, watch the game, report afterward, do all the interviews and stuff, write the stories, and then go home. So it's a long day. A couple stories after the game. By the time you get out of there, it's probably 2 hours or so after the game has ended. So it's the football Saturdays are long, but they're fun.
Yeah. How do you write all these stories when you got the Mets games playing on?
Well, if they're playing, if they're going to be playing some meaningful games in October, I don't know how good my attention is going to be on the.
Right.
I'm kidding, but we will see. It's been an exciting summer to be a Mets fan, and we'll see how it goes.
Yes, totally. So, Greg, thanks for joining us, man. We'll keep in touch and hope the Who's have a good season.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Casey. Appreciate you having me on.
Oh, thank you, buddy.